Wyoming Territory, June 1874. The first thing Beatrice Varnell saw that morning was blood in her wheat. She had gone out early, same as always. Boots still damp with dew, her skirts pulled up just enough to keep from dragging. The sky was a pale orange, sun barely over the pines. That was when she saw the girl crumpled near the fence line, tangled in golden stalks like a broken doll someone tossed aside. Her dress was torn, her arms scraped raw, and blood soaked the side of her bodice. Beatrice ran. The girl was breathing, but her eyes fluttered behind their lids and her lips were cracked dry. Beatrice dropped to her knees, cradled the girl's face, and whispered, "You're all right now. You're safe." She was not sure the girl heard her. Beatrice hoisted her up, staggering under the weight, and carried her back to the house, heart pounding harder than it had in years. The girl was no more than 18, maybe 19, though thin as a rail. Whoever she was, something awful had happened to her. Inside, Beatrice laid her on the spare bed. It had been over a year since anyone but her used that room since her husband, Samuel, died of a fever last spring, leaving her with the farm, the horses, and the quiet kind of ache that never fully left. She'd gotten used to silence. But now the house hummed with purpose again. She cleaned the girl's wounds with warm water and lye soap, careful not to wake her. Her palms were stained red. After she finished, she walked to the basin to rinse off. The water turned pink, then something caught the light. Beatrice stared. A small, jagged nugget, no bigger than a corn kernel, gleamed in her palm, gold, her breath hitched. She turned it over, rubbing it between her fingers. It was not dirt, not brass. It was real. She looked back at the girl. Who in God's name had wandered onto her land, half dead and bleeding with gold on her by sunset? The girl stirred. Beatrice was fixing broth when she heard the soft cough from the bedroom. She rushed in. "Do not sit up too fast," Beatrice said, kneeling beside her again. "You lost a good deal of blood." The girl blinked. "Where am I?" "My farm, just outside Rawlins." Beatrice offered her water. "What is your name?" "Clara," she whispered. "Clara Bishop." Beatrice nodded. "I am Beatrice Varnell." Clara's eyes filled with panic. "They are going to come after me." Beatrice froze. "Who?" Clara hesitated. "Men. They killed the others. My brother, he found something, up in the hills near Fort Steele. We were panning for days. He hid what he found, but they knew. They wanted it." "Gold?" Beatrice asked. Clara nodded. Beatrice said nothing about the nugget in her basin. "You are safe here." "No one's safe," Clara said, her voice cracking. "They will not stop." Beatrice looked out the window, jaw tight. She had buried a husband and survived 2 winters alone. She was not about to be frightened off by shadows. The next morning, Beatrice rode into town. She needed help. And there was only one man she trusted enough to ask, Baron McCree. He was the local blacksmith's son, but he had gone off to fight in the war young, and came back even younger in the eyes, with a shotgun across his back and a weariness in his bones. Beatrice had known him before she married Samuel, when they were both just small-town kids who watched storms roll in from the porch and shared secrets in church pews. She found him in the stable behind the forge, hammering a busted bit into shape. He looked up when he heard her boots. "Baron," she said, "I need you." He dropped the hammer. She told him everything in quiet words, hands shaking only once. He listened. Not once did he interrupt. When she finished, he reached for his rifle. "You think they will come for her?" he asked. Beatrice nodded. "She says they are killers." "Then I will stay," she blinked. "Baron, you took her in," he said. "I will not let you face this alone." He saddled his horse without another word. By dusk, Baron had moved into the small guest room across from Clara's. He did not ask questions about the gold. Not yet. That night, Beatrice stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, watching the darkness swallow the fields. Baron joined her, leaning against the rail. "You still talk to him?" he asked after a while. She did not have to ask who. "Sometimes," she said, "when it is quiet." He looked up at the stars. "I think he would be proud." She looked at him, then really looked. His face was rougher than she remembered. jawline thicker, hair dusted with silver at the temples, but his eyes were still the same. He glanced at her and smiled, soft and tired. "You always were the brave one." Her throat tightened. "No, I just act first." "Same thing," he said. Days passed. Clara grew stronger, eating more. Beatrice and Baron worked the land by day and watched the tree line by night. Nothing came. But the feeling of being watched never left. Then, one morning, Beatrice walked out to the barn and found the door open. A set of boot prints pressed into the mud. She ran back, heart in her throat. Baron was already at the porch, rifle in hand. Someone was here. "We need to move her," Beatrice said. Baron nodded. "I know a place. Old trapper's cabin up by Elk Hollow. No one goes there anymore." They packed by nightfall. The ride was hard, the trail narrow, but by dawn they reached the cabin, small, one room, but sturdy. Clara curled up by the fire, exhausted. Beatrice stood outside, arms crossed, watching the trees. Baron joined her, brushing dirt off his sleeves. "You think this will hold?" she asked. He looked at her, voice low. "I will not let anything happen to you." Beatrice stared at him, something warm starting to stir low in her chest. He stepped closer. "You have always mattered to me, Bea, even when I was too stupid to say it." She looked up at him. "Do not say that just because we are in danger." "I am saying it because it is true." She reached out, fingers brushing his coat. "I missed you, Baron." He leaned down, forehead resting against hers. "I am right here." For the first time in years, she felt safe. And maybe, just maybe, she was not alone anymore. Snow still clung to the northern slopes in Elk Hollow, even though it was June. The air held a bitter trace of pine sap and cold stone, and the old trapper's cabin creaked in the wind as if remembering winters long past. Inside, the fire burned low but steady. Clara slept in fits, waking only to sip broth or shift beneath the wool blankets Baron had hauled down from the attic. Beatrice stood near the hearth, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear as she watched a flame catch deeper into the log. She hadn't meant to stay up, but sleep had refused her. Her hands still ached from the climb, and her thoughts darted like mice in the walls. Baron's voice came low from the doorway. "There's movement near the ridge. Could be elk, could be men." She turned to him. "You saw them?" "No." But the birds went quiet all at once. "That's no elk." Beatrice reached for her coat. "We need to be ready to move again." He stepped in, closed the door behind him, and leaned his rifle against the frame. "We'll hold here through morning. They won't track well in the dark." She rubbed her arms. "Clara can't ride again tonight. Her ribs are still healing." Baron nodded once, then crossed to the table and unrolled a piece of canvas, revealing a map scrawled with faded ink and finger-worn edges. "There's an old mining tunnel a half-day northeast. Been sealed for years, but it opens out near the canyon mouth. We could use it if we had to." Beatrice studied the lines, frowning. "You know that land well." "My uncle worked iron near there. Took me along when I was a boy. Showed me places not even the army scouts know." She glanced at him. "Why'd you come back, Baron? After the war?" He didn't answer at first, just traced a line on the map with his thumb. "Some men lose themselves out there," he said. "I nearly did." She waited. "I had a sergeant who used to say, 'Surviving ain't the same as living.' I didn't believe him until I came home and saw your light still burning in the window." Beatrice felt the quiet settle between them like snow. "I didn't know you looked." "I always looked." She turned to the fire, jaw tight. "After Samuel died, I didn't think I'd feel anything again, not like this." Baron stepped closer, but not too close. "Then don't turn away from it." They stood in silence, the kind that held weight but no fear. Behind them, Clara stirred. Beatrice moved first, crossing the room and kneeling beside the cot. Clara blinked slowly. "I heard someone outside." Beatrice brushed her hair back gently. "We're keeping watch. You're safe." Clara's fingers curled around Beatrice's wrist. "If they find me, they'll take it from you too, the gold. They're not after me anymore. They'll be after whoever's got it now." Beatrice met her gaze. "They don't know I have it." Clara sat up straighter, breath shallow. You found some, Beatrice nodded once, in your dress, when I washed the blood from my hands. Clara looked away, lips pressed thin. My brother swore there was a vein near the old riverbed. He said it was enough to start over. Get us off the claim and out of the camps. We never meant to keep it secret, just needed time. Did he tell anyone else? No, but the men who followed us, they knew. I think they were watching from the start, waiting for him to stumble on something worth killing for. Baron stepped forward. How many? 3, maybe 4. One rode with a limp, another had a scar through his lip. They don't ask questions, they take. Beatrice rose. We're not going to let them take anything more. Baron looked to her. At first light, I'll ride down to the canyon, set traps along the ridge trail. If they come that way, they'll slow. She met his eyes. And if they come through the trees, then I stay close. Later, Beatrice stood outside while the others slept. The wind combed through the pines, stirring the scent of sap and old ash. She held the small nugget in her palm, its edges dull in the moonlight. It was heavy not in weight, but in what it meant. Behind her, soft footsteps pressed into the frost-hardened ground. Baron stopped at her side, hands in his coat pockets. You thinking about keeping it? She didn't answer right away. I'm thinking about what it cost. He studied her face. You don't owe me an answer, but I'd follow you either way. She turned to him, the warmth of his nearness grounding her in a way she hadn't let herself feel in years. I don't want to run anymore, not from grief, not from gold, not from myself. He looked down at her, voice roughened at the edges. Then we stand. Beatrice nodded, slow and steady. Together. He reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing hers, and for the first time since Samuel's grave settled under sagebrush, she didn't pull away. They stood like that until the sky began to pale and the first birds sang again. The sun broke over the pines with a cold, white light that left no warmth on the skin. Beatrice stood at the edge of the clearing, her boots sunk deep in pine needles and frost. She watched as steam rose from the horses' backs, tethered quietly beneath the lean-to. Baron had left an hour earlier, rifle strapped across his back, to set traps along the ridge trail. He had not said when he would return. Inside the cabin, Clara sat near the hearth, her knees drawn to her chest, the wool blanket slipping from one shoulder. Beatrice handed her a tin cup of boiled chicory. You keep looking toward the trees, Clara said, her voice stronger than it had been. I'm listening for the sound of hooves. I didn't think I'd live long enough to hear someone say that and mean it. Beatrice pulled a stool near the fire and sat. You said they killed your brother. Clara nodded once, jaw tightening. Was it quick? No. They wanted him to tell where he'd kept the gold. He wouldn't. He kept saying it's for Clara. Then they dragged him behind the wagon and I ran. Beatrice didn't reach for her. Instead, she let the silence hold the weight. Clara stared into the flames. When I was younger, I used to dream about California. I'd read about the coast and orange groves and girls with parasols walking along the sea. I thought gold would get me there. Beatrice rested her hands on her knees. I used to think I'd live in a house without creaking floors. Clara looked up. You loved your husband. Yes, but he wasn't an easy man. He didn't believe in dreaming. You do, Beatrice gave a slow nod. I believe in surviving first, then maybe dreams. Clara let the fire warm her hands. I think your man, Baron, he believes in you. That scares me more than the men in the woods. Outside, a crow shrieked once and went quiet. Beatrice stood, moving to the window. The ridge beyond the clearing was still. No movement, no sound but the wind brushing through branches like breath. By mid-morning, Baron returned with a shallow cut across his cheekbone and mud up to his knees. They've split, he said before she could ask. 2 on foot, 1 stayed with the horses. They're circling from opposite sides. How long until they reach us? Less than 2 hours if they keep moving. Clara rose shakily. Let me help. Baron shook his head. You'll slow us down. Then give me a rifle. Beatrice looked between them. She's not wrong. Baron hesitated, then crossed to the corner and unwrapped a short Spencer carbine. He checked the chamber, handed it to Clara, and said, "Don't shoot unless you see their eyes." Beatrice gathered what supplies they couldn't leave behind: food wrapped in oilcloth, a water tin, the nugget tucked into the heel of her boot. She hadn't told Clara she still carried it. She wasn't sure yet if that was mercy or caution. They left the cabin before noon, cutting northeast toward the old mining tunnel Baron had mentioned. He led them through a ravine choked with scrub oak and thorn, Clara in the middle, Beatrice guarding the rear. The tunnel mouth was hidden behind a curtain of rockfall and moss, half collapsed. Baron pulled free a rusted lantern from beneath a ledge and lit it with a match drawn from his coat. The light flickered against the damp stone. "Stay close. It runs about a mile through the hill." Then we dropped down into the canyon. Clara hesitated at the entrance. Beatrice laid a hand on her shoulder. "There's nothing in there that wants to hurt you." "That's not what I'm afraid of," Clara whispered. The tunnel was colder than the air outside, the walls slick with years of seep. They moved single file, boots crunching old gravel and broken timbers. The smell of rust and earth pressed against their lungs. Halfway through, Baron stopped. "Someone's been here." Beatrice stepped beside him. A set of bootprints not theirs led deeper into the dark, the tread fresh, not yet softened by moisture. "Could be a trap," he said, "or a shortcut," Beatrice offered. Clara gripped her rifle tighter. "We don't have time to double back." They moved faster, eyes on the walls, ears tuned to the smallest sound. Near the end of the tunnel it narrowed, then opened sharply into daylight. Baron stepped out first, crouched low, scanning the ravine below. Clear. They emerged into a cleft overlooking a dry riverbed, the stone sun warmed and wide enough to move without single file. A hawk circled overhead. Beatrice turned to Clara. "You still want California?" Clara blinked at the sudden light. "I want somewhere that doesn't smell like blood." Baron looked down the slope, then back toward the tunnel. "We'll make for the canyon. There's a ranch near the far edge. Belongs to a woman I knew. She keeps to herself but helps when she can." Beatrice fell in step beside him. "You trust her? She once pulled 3 bullets from my leg, never asked what put them there." Clara followed, slower but with her head high. They reached the canyon's edge by dusk. The air was warm, the stone glowing amber under the setting sun. A wild plum tree bloomed nearby, its blossoms tangled in the breeze. Baron knelt to check the trail ahead. "No sign of them. We may have bought time." Beatrice crouched beside him, voice low. "You think they'll stop?" "No." He met her eyes. "But I think they'll lose us." She looked toward the horizon. "And after we build something." Clara stepped forward, her face flushed from the climb. "I don't think I want the gold anymore." Beatrice gave a soft nod. "Then we leave it behind." Baron reached for Beatrice's hand, fingers laced quietly around hers. She didn't pull away. The wind shifted, soft through the canyon. Above them, the sky deepened into the quiet blue of coming night. They followed the narrow deer trail along the canyon wall, the stone warm underfoot from the afternoon heat. The ranch Baron had spoken of didn't show itself until the last bend, a low, square house tucked into a grove of cottonwoods, its chimney trailing a thin line of smoke into the sky. A single windmill turned slowly beside the barn. No fences, no dog, just quiet. Baron raised a hand and called out once. A tall woman stepped from the doorway, rifle across her chest. Her eyes narrowed, then softened when she saw him. "Thought you were already dead," she said. "Not yet," Baron replied, pulling his hat off. The woman looked past him, taking stock of Beatrice and Clara without asking names. "Come in, then. You'll bring trouble, I expect." Beatrice met her gaze. "Not if we can help it." The woman nodded once. "Name's Ruth. You'll sleep in the loft. Keep your boots by the door and your fire low." Inside, the house was clean but worn. The table bore the marks of years of use, and the shelves sagged with jars of dried beans and pickled root. Ruth didn't ask questions. She set out food without fuss and poured water from a copper kettle so clean it caught the firelight like glass. That night, Beatrice lay in the loft beneath a patched quilt, the rafters above her carved with initials she didn't recognize. Clara slept beside her, breath even, her face turned toward the wall. Below them, Baron sat cross-legged on the floor, oiling his rifle in silence. Beatrice whispered down. "What did she mean, thought you were already dead?" Baron didn't look up. "I came through here 6 winters ago. I was bleeding bad. Ruth patched me up but told me not to come back. And yet she let us in. She's not one for kindness, but she remembers who stayed honest." Beatrice rested her head on her arm. "You think we'll have to leave again?" he answered without hesitation. "Yes." Dawn came clear and sharp. Ruth handed them a sack of cornmeal and a strip of dried venison without asking where they were headed. As they packed, Clara stood at the edge of the grove, watching the windmill turn. "I don't know what to do," she said when Beatrice came up beside her. "I thought when I got away it would be over, but it just keeps following." Beatrice adjusted the strap on her satchel. "Then you stop running, you choose a place to stand, and you make it yours." Clara looked at her, brows drawn. "Did you ever want to leave Wyoming?" "I did. After Samuel died, I thought I'd sell the land and go east, maybe teach. But then spring came and I saw the wheat rise again. I remembered what roots feel like." Clara's voice was quiet. "I don't have roots." Beatrice placed a hand on her shoulder. "You do now." They rode out that morning, heading west along the river's edge. The terrain shifted from canyon rock to open flats where sagebrush rippled under the breeze like water. Baron led, scanning the horizon. They moved slow, conserving the horses. By mid-afternoon, they spotted smoke. Not from a home. Black and thin, rising straight from the edge of a distant ridge. Clara pulled her horse short. "That's them." Baron raised his spyglass, studied the ridge. 3 horses, 1 man on foot. He dropped the glass. They found the cabin. Beatrice's pulse quickened. "We need to lead them away. Let them think we're heading farther west." Baron pointed to a dry wash cutting through the hills. "We'll ride down through there. The tracks'll scatter on the stone." They moved fast, the wash carving a path through shale and broken root. At a narrow bend, Baron slowed, then motioned them to stop. He dismounted, crouched behind a boulder, and pressed his palm to the ground. "One rider's already ahead of us." "How far?" Beatrice asked. "Close enough." Clara dismounted, hands trembling just slightly as she drew the carbine from its strap. "I'm ready." "No," Baron said. "You both climb up into those rocks. You'll have cover. If I can't draw him off, I'm not leaving you exposed," Beatrice said. He looked at her, steady and calm. "I know." She held his gaze a moment longer, then turned and climbed. Clara just behind. From the rocks, they saw him, a tall man, long coat flapping behind him, rifle slung low. He rode slow, scanning the wash like he expected something. When Baron stepped out, the man reined his horse, lifted the rifle. "Looking for someone," Baron called. The man didn't answer. He raised the rifle an inch higher. Beatrice's finger hovered near the trigger. Then Baron took a step forward. "You're wasting your time. The girl's gone." "Gold's gone too." The man tilted his head. "You sure about that?" "I buried it. You'll never find it." The man laughed. "We don't need to find it. We just need to find who's willing to die for it." Beatrice's breath caught. The man didn't see Clara shift her weight behind the rocks. Didn't see the way her hands steadied. But Beatrice did. Clara fired once. The man's shoulder snapped back. He dropped the rifle as he fell from the saddle, hitting the ground hard. Baron ran forward, kicked the fallen rifle away, and crouched beside him. "You send the others after us." The man's mouth twitched. "They're not far." Baron stood. "Then we move now." They left the wash behind, riding hard until twilight. When they finally stopped, it was in a grove of juniper, the horses lathered and panting. No fire, no talking. Beatrice sat beside Baron in the dark, her hand brushing his. He didn't pull away. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He turned his face toward hers, voice low. "When this is done, I want to stay." She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her fingers slid between his. And in that hush, after all the running, a beginning took shape. They reached the plateau by the time the last of the lights slid behind the hills. The sky, wide and unbroken, turned the color of old steel. Baron found an outcrop beside a dry creek where the horses could graze, and Beatrice gathered what little kindling she could from the wind-scrubbed brush. The fire they built was small, just enough to warm water and chase off the chill curling through their coats. Clara sat with her back against her saddle, her eyes fixed on the darkening horizon. The long ride had drawn a line of weariness across her face, but there was still something steady in her gaze now, not the brittle fear from before. Beatrice noticed it as she passed her a tin of steeped yarrow and pine strength, quiet and earned. "There's a mining town about a day west," Baron said as he finished checking the horse's hooves. "Laramie Fork. Small, but it's got a telegraph post and a sheriff who doesn't take to outsiders." Clara looked up. "You think they'll follow us there?" "They might try," he said, setting his rifle within reach. "But they won't walk into a place with a badge unless they're desperate." Beatrice sat down beside him, drawing her coat tighter. "We didn't bring much they can take anymore." Baron leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "They're not chasing gold now. They're chasing unfinished business." Clara's voice came soft. "Then we finish it." Baron nodded once but said nothing more. The night was cold but quiet, and when Beatrice woke just before dawn, it was to the sound of Baron's voice, low and firm. "He's close," he said to Clara, who was already crouched beside him, rifle in hand. Beatrice rose without a word, drawing her coat around her shoulders. They moved as one, climbing the slope above the camp, where the rocks gave them a clear view of the gulch below. A lone rider emerged from the trees, his coat torn at the sleeve, hat pulled low. He rode slow, rifle across his lap, scanning the brush with a hunter's patience. Baron watched the rider, then drew a breath. "He's the last one," Clara swallowed. "The one with the limp," Baron nodded. Beatrice looked toward the camp. "We can't let him circle back." Baron stepped into the open, rifle raised. The rider jerked his reins but didn't fire. He looked up at Baron and smiled, teeth yellowed and thin. "You're a long way from shelter." Baron didn't blink. "You're alone." The rider's horse shifted beneath him. "Not stupid, though. You think I came all this way to fall to a farmer and 2 women. You came all this way to die," Clara said, stepping from behind the rocks, rifle aimed with both hands. The man looked at her, then to Beatrice, who had taken position across from him. Baron's voice was calm. "We've buried better men than you." The rider's gaze flicked between them, calculating, but something in Clara's stance gave him pause, something hardened and sure. He lowered his rifle slowly, then let it fall to the ground. "I was only ever promised a cut," he muttered. "Didn't figure I'd be chasing ghosts for it." Beatrice stepped forward. "Then leave." He looked at her, eyes narrow. "You'll let me walk," Clara's voice came firm. "Ride. And if we ever see your face again, you won't get the chance to ask." He gathered his reins, backed his horse, and turned without another word. They watched until he vanished into the trees. Baron exhaled, shoulders loosening. "That's it." Beatrice looked to Clara. "You all right?" Clara nodded. "I think I'm done running." They rode into Laramie Fork the next day, sun high and warm on their backs. The town was little more than a cluster of buildings strung along a single street livery, general store, a whitewashed church, and a saloon with faded paint. But it was quiet, and that quiet felt different than the silence they'd been carrying. It felt like stillness. Clara found work within a week helping the doctor's wife with records and deliveries. She moved into a room above the bakery where she could watch the sun rise over the hills each morning. She didn't speak of California again. Baron bought a small parcel of land outside town Rocky, but with a well-fed creek and a stand of cottonwood. Beatrice helped him clear it. They built a home with their own hands, using stone from the hills and timber hauled in from the next county. It wasn't large, but it stood firm against the wind. One evening, after the final beam was set and the hearth laid, they stood on the porch watching dust lift in the road. Baron leaned on the rail, his hands scarred and stained from the work. "You ever think of leaving it all behind?" he asked. Beatrice looked out at the land. No, not anymore. He turned toward her, eyes steady. I was always half a man without a place to stay. You gave me one. She smiled, quiet and sure. You gave me back the part of myself that knew how to wait for something good. He reached for her hand, and she gave it freely. They married in the spring, under the cottonwoods, with Clara standing beside Beatrice, and the preacher from town reading from a worn Bible. No flowers, no fuss, just the wind, the trees, and the warmth of two people choosing one another. Years passed, but the home they built held strong. Clara stayed close, later marrying the man who ran the telegraph. She never spoke of gold again, but she kept a small stone on her windowsill, a reminder, not a prize. Beatrice and Baron grew older together, their love not loud, but deep-rooted. He still rose early to tend the horses, and she still hummed when she baked bread. On winter nights, they sat by the fire, her head resting on his shoulder as the wood popped and cracked. They found peace not because they escaped what came before, but because they faced it, endured it, and chose one another when the dust finally settled. And in the quiet, in the warmth of their home, the past faded like smoke, and love remained steady as the earth beneath their boots.